Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. Rabbi Richman here, together with Yitzchak Reuven, coming to you from Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, the holy city of Jerusalem. Today is the 5th day of the month of Tevet, Yom Shlishi, 5777. It is Tuesday, the 3rd of January 2017, and this Shabbat, the Torah portion of Vayigash. And he approached, referring to Yehuda approaching Yosef, this Parsha, all about the fevered crescendo of the reunion of Yosef with his brothers, the reunion of Yosef with his father Yaakov. Yosef getting to see his younger brother Benjamin, whom he had practically never seen. Only saw him when he was a baby many years before. First, a little bit about the month that we have now begun, the month of Tevet. And of course, again, just finished Chanukah, just finished celebrating the holiday of Chanukah, ending with the most beautiful of days, Zot Chanukah, called so for the Torah portion that we read in Parashat Naso in the book of Numbers, Zot Chanukat HaMizbeach. This is the dedication of the altar, and the tradition of our sages that on that last day of Chanukah packs such a wallop, such a punch. There's such a prayerful day. It's a day in which all of the light of the holiday of Chanukah that has been released into the world is concentrated on that day, and it's considered to be a great day for prayer and for making dreams come true. And so many people had the foresight to spend that entire day in earnest and honest prayer, supplication before Hashem, asking that all of our dreams should come true. But I got to say this, because some people didn't get that message in time, and some people were not aware of the great power of prayer of that day. And so to a person who would say, but don't you have anything else for me in that black bag? Isn't there any hope for me? I didn't know. To that person I would say, absolutely, today is also a day that is predisposed to prayer.
Whoa.
Every day we should treat it the same way. Yes, there is a particular tradition about that day, that it's a great day for prayer, but so is any day. Do you think if you come along now and you say, but Hashem, I didn't know, can't you bless me now? Can't I pray to you now? Can't I ask for something now? Of course you can. And that's the beauty of being alive for Hashem, for God. That's the whole idea, is that every day is different. Every day, no 2 days are alike. No 2 days are the same. No day is similar to the day before. And so, what, you missed it, so now you have to wait another year and go to the back of the line and he's not going to listen to you now? No, but we will tell you when something special is going on, because every day is different and every day has different potential and power, and we very much appreciate and esteem the special traditions that we have about the singularity of time and the special days that we have. But obviously, any day that we turn over our lives and that we beg Hashem for a new heart, and that we want to change everything, and that we want to be starting anew, and we want to start fresh, and we want to have teshuvah, and we want everything to be different, then that's that day. So it's never too late. But Hanukkah is the only holiday that starts in one month and enters into the next, and that's what happens, because Hanukkah begins on the 25th day of Kislev and it ends on the 3rd day of Tevet. So it's interesting because, first of all, the general attribute of Tevet is one more leaning towards anxiety, anguish, grief. Kabbalistically, there's a whole idea about Tevet being a time for the rectification of the attribute of anger. But that's another story. But the point is that Tevet is best known for 3 fast days that take place in it. So even though the month of Kislev was characterized, was highlighted by the joy, the light, the illumination of Hanukkah, and the festival of Hanukkah continues into Tevet, then it sputters out, as it were, it would seem to you, on the 3rd day. And then the very next week we have 3 days that are days of somewhat of infamy. They're difficult days. Now, in the time that the Talmud was written, in ancient times, people had a greater physical strength, and they had stronger constitutions, and they were much more utzmati. They were much more centered. They had a certain...
Robust?
Yes, they had a certain moxie to them, a certain power. And people used to fast 3 days in a row. They used to fast the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of Tevet.
Fasting during the daytime hours.
Yes, not at the night, not like Yom Kippur, but like the minor fasts from daylight, from sunrise, from dawn, that is, to nightfall. What are those 3 fasts all about? So on the 8th of Tevet is an ancient fast day, which is now called Ta'anit Tzadikim. That means that only the very pious and righteous fast on that day. It's very unusual in our time, but that's the day, the 8th of Tevet is the day that the Torah was translated into Greek. That's called the Septuagint. And that was a day of tremendous tragedy for the people of Israel, because even though the whole world should have access to Torah and should be able to study it, the king, Ptolemy, that ordered the translation of the Torah into Greek had different ideas in mind. And the problem with the translation, as you know, as we speak about often, is that you never really have the real thing, and it always falls short. So a person can think that they have it right here in their hands, but it's something else altogether. It's a dangerous thing, an improper translation. But that's another story that we'll speak about a little bit later. That's the idea. The 8th of Tevet was once observed as a major fast when people were stronger, and that's the day that the Torah was translated into Greek. The next day, and by the way, this week, the 8th of Tevet is Friday. The 9th of Tevet is Shabbat. And the fast anyway wouldn't be observed on a Shabbat, but in the old days, again, people used to fast all 3 days. The 9th of Tevet, of course, is the day upon which Ezra, the scribe, and Nehemiah, that they were the sages who brought up the people of Israel from the Babylonian exile and saw to their needs and were their benefactors and their spiritual leaders as well. They passed away on that day, and that was a very great tragedy for the people of Israel, because they had no leadership and in that generation. And as we all know, fitting, proper, righteous leadership is what the Jewish people really need. So that was a great day of mourning. The 10th day of Tevet, which this year occurs on Sunday, this coming Sunday, which is a communal fast day in our time for everybody, 10th day of Tevet, is the day upon which the king of Babylonian, Nebuchadnezzar, laid siege to Jerusalem. That siege lasted for 3 years, until finally, 3 years later, the walls of the city were breached in the month of Tammuz. And those are the 3 days of Tevet.
And that fast day, the 10th of Tevet, was a fast day that was referred to or instituted by the prophet Zechariah. Am I correct?
Correct.
Zachariah.
We're talking here 2,605 years ago by my count. I might be wrong, but I don't think so. 2,605 years ago, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylonia,
breached the wall.
Stood opposite the entrance to Jerusalem with his army and started the siege against the city. And that led eventually to the destruction of the first temple on Tisha B'Av 3 years later. But first, it led to the breaching of the wall. So since then, for thousands of years, thousands of Jews have fasted every day on that day. And by the way, in the year 1950, the chief rabbinate of Israel designated that day, the 10th day of Tevet, to be a day for the recital of the mourner's prayer, the Kaddish, for all those who perished during the Holocaust, for whom the particular date of their death is unknown. Mm-hmm. That was something that was enacted by the rabbinate. Here's the thing about this movement between this passage between Kislev and Tevet. So, again, ostensibly, it looks very ironic that the Tevet began a little bit with the light of Hanukkah, because we had 3 days of that light. But then all of a sudden, the next week, we are already again in mourning for the temple. It's kind of like the opposite of the feeling that we have when we talk about the passage from Tisha B'Av to Tu B'Av, right? On which I always apply the verse in Psalms 32, Hafachta mispedi lemecholi, right? You have transformed my lament into dance. Right. That we're sitting on the floor and mourning for the temple on the 9th day of Av. But then a few days later, on the 15th of Av, we have a day of great joy, right? Here it's kind of the opposite. We start out the month of Tevet with a little bit of the end of Hanukkah, and then all of a sudden we are back to a consciousness of the destruction of the temple. In other words, we started out with joy, but we pass into this, again, a mentality of commemoration of destruction. So first of all, according to Chassidut, certainly, and according to the mystic sages, it's emphasized that the beginning of the month is the root and the essence of everything, and everything follows that. So the light that was released during Hanukkah in those days, that's the main thing. And of course, our minds, our consciousness is never far from the temple. So it is a wheel. You know, our lives are a wheel, and we're always focused on again, like I spoke about when we were talking about prayer, the singularity of every day. Every day has a different challenge. Every day has a different connection that we try to break our heart with, basically, and make our hearts into real hearts, and so that we feel something and we react and we respond. But the thing is, again, 2,605 years ago, Nebuchadnezzar began the siege against Jerusalem. What I find remarkable is that, let me put it to you this way, okay? That year, can you do the math and tell me what year it was 2,605 years ago?
Oh boy.
I didn't think so, but anyway, 2,605 years ago, whatever Jewish organizations were around, whether it was the ADL or B'nai B'rith or whatever organizations were around, they would... Here, I'm just going to wait a minute, because Yitzchak is doing the math. I'm going to tell us right now.
Keep talking.
It's too distracting. Here he is, and it was the year...
No, that's not right.
Whatever.
I'm working on it.
So that year...
Wait, how many years ago?
2605.
Oh, 2605.
I'm sure everybody that's listening already has the answer, because they're much quicker than us.
Well, and then write in, call us, tell us.
Call us. Why are operators not flooding our switchboard? So that year, let's say that they were Jewish organizations, they wouldn't have had much competition, much contest to determine. The most anti-Semitic act of that year was Nebuchadnezzar's siege against Jerusalem, right? That was the most anti-Semitic act of that year. For all the watchdog organizations, for all the Jewish organizations that are measuring and reporting on incidents of anti-Semitism, that year the most anti-Semitic act was Nebuchadnezzar's laying a siege against Jerusalem. Why? Because the whole reason that he was doing it was to destroy the temple, and therefore to try to destroy the connection between the people of Israel and the God of Israel, and to bring about that state of spiritual darkness, and thus to exercise sovereignty over the people of Israel and the land of Israel. It was all a spiritual battle. It wasn't something that he needed politically. It wasn't something that he needed economically. It was for the sake of destroying the good and the light. Now, what I find amazing is that when you think about it, not too much has changed, and the city of Jerusalem is still under siege. So when you think about the whole idea of the 10th day of Tevet being the time that began the destruction because of a siege that was laid against Jerusalem, and certainly how that would have been hands down the candidate to receive the title of the most anti-Semitic act of that year, I find it outstanding and amazing and noteworthy that Rabbi Marvin Heyer, the dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Holocaust Center, stated that the most anti-Semitic act of the past year, 2016, was America's veto against
America's not veto.
America's non-veto, right, of the United Nations Resolution 2334. And I was, by the way, Rabbi Marvin here, I believe, is going to be delivering one of the benedictions at President-elect Trump's inauguration. But I was really so astounded and amazed that he made that statement, which was, I think, very right on and very bold. But he said, yeah, in other words, look at all the incidents that took place in the year 2016. Murders, attacks against Jews, whatever it is, Nazi graffiti, neo-Nazis,
destruction of
skinhead attacks, bomb threats, all sorts of things that took place.
Attacks against synagogues.
Right, vandalizing or arson against synagogues. And the Simon Wiesenthal Center keeps very careful track of all of these things and computes trends and all sorts of things. And he came out and said, you know what the most anti-Semitic act of 2016 was? It was Obama's instructions to the United States ambassador to the United Nations not to veto Resolution 2334, which brands Israel's presence in Jerusalem, amongst other things, absolutely illegal and in flagrant violation to international law. And he goes on and he writes, Rabbi Marvin here of the Simon Wiesenthal Center of Los Angeles, he goes on and writes that this is an attack against every Jew everywhere. I mean, he really spoke about it at length. And he said, this is an attack against every Jew everywhere. So I'm saying to you, 2,605 years ago, the most anti-Semitic act of that year, Rabbi Marvin here would have said, obviously, was Nebuchadnezzar's laying siege against Jerusalem. 2016, the most anti-Semitic act, he says, is America's position on this resolution. So I ask you, what's anti-Semitic about that? What is, I mean, really, isn't he being just a little bit Woody Allen here? Isn't he being just a little bit neurotic? Isn't he just being a little bit, I mean, you might ask, isn't he being a little bit over the top? Like, okay, so America didn't veto the resolution and the United Nations did one of their absolutely ridiculous, bombastic, Israel-bashing things, which is very, very terrible and everything like that. But why is it in front of every Jew everywhere? Why is it the most anti-Semitic action of the year? So I'll tell you why he's completely correct and why there's not a thread of exaggeration here. Because just like Nebuchadnezzar laid siege against Jerusalem on the 10th day of Tevet 2,605 years ago for the sole purpose of destroying the temple and destroying all the good and hiding the light and trying to drive a wedge between Israel and her people, so too, what was the reason that Obama did that? Why for? What's the reason for? Why? What was to be gained for America's interests? Politically, economically. Tell me how the nation of America, which is such a watchdog, and which, is so concerned about human rights everywhere, and of course...
Can you still say that?
I think they do. And of course, that's supposed to be what the United Nations is all about. So how does the United Nations, at America's behest, ignore the documented and ongoing atrocities in Syria involving the deaths of thousands of innocents at a time, children, chemical warfare, unbelievable things that are going on, ignoring again ISIS, ignoring again everything that's going on all over the world, and being totally obsessed with Jews building apartments in Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, ignoring, right? Mr. Kerry's speech was such a filthy pack of lies. It is such an embarrassment. He mentioned in that speech, I think, the settlements, I think it was 72 times. I think I heard the figure. I don't have the heart to listen to the whole speech, but I think he mentioned the settlements 72 times, and Iran, I think he mentioned 4 times. Mm-hmm. So But the speech was such a filthy pack of lies because it was like the whole thing is about Israel's intransigence and the danger that is posed to the two-state solution by Israel's
forget
position.
the danger that it poses to the democratic and Jewish state of Israel. He's only concerned for our
because he loves Israel so much.
democratic
Here's
and
John Kerry
Jewish
to tell
nature.
us how we need to live our lives because he loves
how we need to be
Israel so
Jewish.
much.
How we need to be Jewish and
Here's John
democratic.
Kerry to define what it means to be a Jew in this world for us. Thank you. Enter Mr. Kerry. And ignoring in this speech Palestinian incitement, murder, atrocity, ignoring it completely, and to make a statement that it is unlawful and illegal for Jews to make a home for themselves in their ancestral homeland of 4,000 years, it is just so absolutely, unspeakably, horrifically false. And to ignore all the issues of all the lands that were divided up by the United Nations, by the British Empire, the false lines of demarcation that were drawn up for Jordan and Iraq and Saudi Arabia. But to spin everything that Israel has created this problem of Palestinian refugees, etc., and to ignore the entire scope of history and basically to take all of Jewish history and to throw it in the trash bin and say that we have no connection whatsoever, not to Jerusalem, not to this land, and that we essentially basically don't belong here. But okay, now that we're here, at least let us slice everything up and make the two-state solution. Yeah, Rabbi here, kol hakavod, congratulations for saying what is the truth. This is the most anti-Semitic act of the year 2016, and is an attack against every Jew. Why? Because the only reason that it was done on the bequest, on the behesting, on the order of outgoing President Obama, is because he hates Israel, because he hates the Jewish people, because he wants to do to Israel what he's done to so many other countries and what he's done to America itself. And this is his legacy. It's a swath, a path of destruction. So yeah, nothing's changed, and the 10th day of Tevet is about a siege. It's about a siege against Jerusalem, but we can break it and change it.
Hang in there. Temple Talk will be back soon. Hang in there, Israel.
Be right back on Temple Talk with more wonderful news to share with you.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Richman here in Jerusalem. Today is the 5th day of the month of Tevet. The Rabbi says Tevet and I say Tevet. You can choose, you can decide. Anyway, 5th day of Tevet, 5777. It is the 3rd day of January 2017. This week's Parashat, Torah reading for Shabbat is Vayigash, which we'll be talking about soon. Rabbi talked about the siege on Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, and you talked at length about UN. What number is that? UN
2334,
something like that, and Obama's role in that.
His nefarious, perfidious backstabbing.
Right. So it reminded me, so often during the past 8 years, President Barack Obama has reminded me of the heathen prophet Bilam, who, as we know, and we'll be reading later in the year, put so much effort into trying to curse the children of Israel. And he would go from hilltop to hilltop. Let's say he would go from this international conference to that international conference. He'd go from the UN to the European Union, and he would try each time to really stick it to Israel. He started in Cairo when he first became president 8 years ago, and he kept it up relentlessly. And yet, to tell you the truth, Israel is much stronger much more determined and much more united now, I think, today than 8 years ago. And his cursings actually all turn into blessings. And you can even say, oh, well, he did give Israel a generous, we can argue about that as well, but a generous defense package. And that was the blessing. Maybe that was the blessing that he didn't really want to do. And it was clear that he didn't want to, but he didn't want to hurt Hillary's chances. So he made sure that package was announced just before the election. However, just like Bilam, he took a parting shot. And Bilam, as we know, after he came down from his high places and started to pack his bags, he went to Balak, the king of Moab, who had hired him to do the cursing, and he said, I'll give you some advice. Here's what you do. And as we know, his advice had to do with the mingling of the Israelites with the
Moabite daughters.
Moabite daughters.
He advised that they should...
Midianite daughters.
Yeah, one or the other.
And
they should entice the children of
right.
Israel.
And that was his parting shot. And of course, that created a tremendous entanglement and a tremendous crisis for Israel. So Obama cooked up his own parting shot, which was UN Resolution 2334. And I don't think it's going to have the same effect because the brilliance of Bilam was to have the nations embrace Israel and make Israel feel loved and wanted. But of course, Obama's resolution, which he didn't veto, basically has the opposite effect. And Israel is more determined now, I think, than ever to move forward.
And frankly, I mean, are you
heritage.
worried about Israel? Are you worried about our relationship with Hashem, who's been guiding us, who's had his hand on us all these years? Are you worried about our future? No. But I am just absolutely amazed at the sheer animosity, hatred, unmitigated gall. I'm amazed at the mask coming off. This week also, Yosef's mask comes off. I mean, masks can come off in a very good way. I'm amazed to see the lack of shame and just a total perplexing, like not ambiguous, but the total revelation of there's no more pretending here, like the incredible seething loathing that he has for Israel. And because again, what I was trying to say when I compared him to Nebuchadnezzar, and what I'm trying to say when I said, okay, that year, whatever Jewish organizations that were watching would say, oh, that's certainly the most anti-Semitic event of that year, and this year we have the most anti-Semitic event by far, and instead of vandalizing synagogues or all over the world or anything, was this simple non-action, this simple non-veto. Why?
Non-action, which was actually
right.
A plot cooked
and
up
why
in
do I
advance.
say that's so right on, and he's so correct by calling that the most anti-Semitic incident that affects every Jew? Because it was pure anti-Semitism. There was no other reason to do such a horrible thing to Israel. Anyway.
If I may make a connection between this whole episode and this week's Parashat, Vayigash, yes. And I'm sure you'll have what to say, Rabbi, but I'm just going to put in my 2 cents here. That is, the beginning of Vayigash, of course, Yehuda stands up to this second in command to Egypt, who is his brother Yosef, but he doesn't know yet. And he basically lays it all on the line, and he says, you know what, this is our brother, and he belongs to us, and he's precious to our father, and he's not staying here, and we're taking him back with us, and there's nothing you can do about it. He put it in a nice way, but that's what he intended, and that's what our sages say. Basically, it was a declaration of war. It's all or nothing. It was the moment of truth where he stood up for what was good, what was right, what was necessary, and I think that...
Which, of course, is what Yosef set him up to do. He wanted to see
and I think
he would take that
think
stand.
that this resolution has basically set up Israel to, hopefully, at this point in our history, stand up. And Netanyahu spoke very powerfully in response. But of course, the true test is what will happen next. Will Israel move forward?
I'll see you and raise you. See you and raise you. Because let's say that we're using this metaphor,
yes.
and that the brothers passed the test. Yosef was ready to reveal himself. But what about the brothers, Yosef's brothers now? The Jews of America.
Yes.
Okay, so here, the story is being set up now in our Torah portions the descent of Israel into the darkness of Egypt. Right now, everything is cool, but soon things are going to change. They're going to change at lightning speed. And Israel that came in with this beautiful pageantry, they came in welcome. They came in as guests of Pharaoh. They're soon going to become the slaves of the Egyptian machine. They're soon going to be in a terrible, terrible travail. How should I say this exactly? I don't understand how the Jewish people in America that have traditionally been the strong supporters of the Democratic Party, I don't know how they're dealing with all of this. I don't know how they're dealing with the revelation. I don't know how they're dealing with their party, which is becoming more and more blatantly anti-Israel
a party
every
that
day.
doesn't know Yosef.
Every day, they're so in a way, it feels to me like what happened to the brothers in Egypt is now what is being set up in America, and especially with all the tremendous animosity against the incoming president. There's so much that is being blamed. The Jews are being blamed for, by all sorts of people. So it's all very, very strange, is what I'm saying. I don't think what I'm looking for is this in our parsha. It's such a powerful verse. Yosef could not restrain himself in the presence of all who stood before him. So he called out, "Remove everyone from before me."
Mm-hmm.
Thus no one remained with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. This theme of it being a family affair, no one is there. When this moment comes, when all of Israel is in recognition and in mutual respect of each other and the powers that be, because this is working on many levels. There is the koach, the power of Yosef, of Mashiach ben Yosef, of everything that's needed for the Yosefian vision and the Yosefian approach to bringing about the redemption. And then there's the approach of Yehuda, and they have to work together to lay the groundwork for the ultimate redemption. So that began to happen now in Egypt because Egypt is the template for the ultimate redemption as well. But when this moment comes, after all of the tremendous travail and misunderstandings and heartache and accusations and terrible miscommunications and misunderstandings, when the moment comes that all that is fixed and the moment of the revelation comes, Yosef says, "Get everyone else out of here, everyone who is not part of our family. Get them out." And when is that moment going to come about? When the brethren of the people of Israel recognize what the state of Israel is really all about. Because I think that the biggest problem facing the Jewish people today now worldwide is that the Jewish people who do not live in the land of Israel do not really understand what this land, country, state is all about. Not just what it represents, but what it really means to them as Jews. And this is also something that's polled and discussed and staticized and is discussed by all these organizations. This level of disconnect and polarization and alienation that many Jews feel from the state of Israel. This is the moment that we're looking for, the Yosefian moment of recognition of, and you know what, all of you, various people, Obama, Trump, all of you, thanks, but now leave the room, because we have something to do here that's very intimate, very personal. Do you recognize your brother? And this is exactly what this is all leading to. This is a parallel to our lives right now. Yosef put his brothers in a difficult place where they had to prove something. They had to prove that they understand what it was that he was all about. And that's what I see here being set up as well. Because there has to be a moment of reckoning coming. In other words, look, let's be frank. What just happened, we spoke about it all last week's program, what just happened, this resolution, this incredible bearing of what these people are really all about, what John Kerry is really all about, what Obama is really all about. What just happened is a devastating blow to the state of Israel and to the Jewish people. Again, not that I'm not saying that we're in any sort of trouble or that we're not. That's not the point. It's a devastating revelation.
Right.
Right. We never relied on the UN. We never relied on Barack Obama. We never relied on John Kerry. We rely on God. But what I'm saying, the fact that they could show us this, and we see this sheer face of evil, that's a game changer that we will never, ever forget what we've seen here. But yet, for a lot of Jews, it's like, yeah, thank you. That was the right thing to say. Yeah, two-state solution. Thank you so much for loving Israel so much, for being so concerned about our future, because we really do need you to push the two-state solution, which of course is the demise of Israel. The two-state solution is nothing less than the destruction of Israel. So instead of criticizing, the incitement to murder that's being taught by American and European-funded school books in the Palestinian schools, instead of criticizing the streets that are named after the Palestinians who murder Jews, or the stipends that they receive, that their families receive from murdering Jews, or any of those things.
And while creating, through his years of passivity and non-intervention, creating a situation in which millions of Muslims are flooding into Europe.
Well, he created...
And then at the same time that millions of Muslims are flooding into Europe, he's saying Jews are not allowed to live in Jerusalem over a certain line. Right. They're not allowed to purchase a house there or build a house in Beit El or outside of Shechem or in Hebron or anywhere else in Judea, Samaria.
Or where you and I live, as we mentioned last week, we are international criminals, the two of us. We're together with many hundreds of thousands of Jews. But the point is, he created ISIS. He's flooding Europe. He created the Arab Spring, which has brought nothing but devastation and misery and mayhem and the death of untold hundreds of thousands of innocents. And the
man who nuclear empowered Iran, the man who brought Putin and Russia to the Middle East, where they have now an Air Force base in Syria, which to a great extent impairs Israel's ability to defend the nation. Yes, Obama has wreaked havoc throughout the world. 17 more days, people.
What will be the reaction and the resolution and the understanding of the Jewish people in America? That's the question.
Yeah.
Do they understand what this is really all about?
Let's hope they're waking up to this.
So we're reading Parashat Vayigash. It's so what is the word? It's so moving. It's so amazing when Yosef finally reveals himself, and the brothers have gone through what they have gone through and realize now at whose hands it was. Was the rectification made? Is it complete? Did they really learn their lesson? That's something that I want to touch upon in depth in a whole new way in this week's video lesson that you can find on YouTube this week and on Temple Institute's Facebook page. The issue of how far does this go? Was it really healed? Was there a healing for all time? What it represents, the relationship of Yosef and his brothers. And of course the stage is now being set for a whole new era and a whole new chapter in history. And it had to happen this way. So Yosef is going to finally get to see his father. And there's going to be a lot of crying in this Torah portion, a lot of weeping, a lot of kissing. And that, again, just a little teaser for you here, not a spoiler. I want to understand that on a much deeper level. And so we're going to be learning about that in our video lesson this week. By the way, the Haftorah, the prophetic reading for this week's Torah portion, is none other than Ezekiel chapter 37, where we learn about the prophet being told to put these two sticks together.
Right.
And to initiate an action that will bring together the entire house of Israel. And here again, this is a very timely idea And it's all foreshadowed by Yosef and his brothers. And I think it can be seen in many ways today.
Rabbi, you mentioned earlier in the show, we talked a little bit about the 8th, 9th, and the 10th day of Tevet, and the 8th day, of course, being the day of the translation of the Torah into Greek by decree of the King Ptolemy, who was the king of Egypt. And if I remember correctly, I wasn't there, but if I remember correctly, he took 70 scholars, sages, Torah sages, and put them each in a separate room and said, translate this into Greek. And I think he was hoping to find discrepancies between their translations, and that way he could, put the screws to him or something. However, each one had Ruach HaKodesh, each one had a
divine inspiration,
and each translated the Torah identically. How do you say that? Identically?
I think it's the word you're looking for is just identically.
Identically. And not only that, but each made slight changes in order to prevent a translation into becoming a gross misunderstanding, and each made the exact same change. So it seems
that had to do with.
It seems like a wonderful event.
The changes that they made had to do with
test.
Forestalling theological bombshells that he would try to say that there's more than one God and all sorts of things like that.
So
by the way, as many translations do today on purpose.
Yes.
Non-Jewish translations.
Right. So they're put to the test. They stood the test, and they came through with flying colors. Yet we see it as a dark day.
We see it, not only do we see it as a dark day, but the sages of Israel actually used the expression that the eyes of Israel were darkened on that day, and that the world was plunged into darkness. And I think the key to understanding this mystery of why is that such a bad thing? I mean, after all, like if we didn't have Art Scroll today, like people wouldn't be studying Torah all over the world. I think the key to understanding the fine level of insight of the sages is another cryptic and elusive midrashic passage where the sages state that the event of the translation of the Torah into Greek was as great a tragedy for Israel as the worship of the golden calf. And when I learned that, I understood what it is that they're trying to say here, because basically what the golden calf was all about was it was an illusion. Mm-hmm. It was a sleight of hand. It wasn't, and again, this is something that one has to study in depth to understand what the golden calf was all about. It wasn't about gross idolatry, like worshiping this as God. It was about some sort of prop to be able to focus on, because we're only people, and so we need something tangible, and so just like let's just be able to it's like creature comfort, it's like something that we can relate to, it's in our zone, so it's like makes us feel a little bit better. So what's the danger of that? The danger of that is that it's not God, because God has no beginning and no end and no form, and therefore it is idolatry, and therefore the problem is that you think you have something, you think you understand something, you think you're relating to something, but you're so far from what it really is that is a gross, violation of Hashem's honor for you to think anything about this thing as being a way of relating to godliness. So too, the same thing can happen when a person has an inadequate translation, and they can get a PhD in it, or they can get get some sort of accreditation. They can say, "Oh, I understand now. This is it. Here, I have it right here. I have it in my books. I have it right here on my shelves. I have it right here. I've got the finest edition." But you know what? If it's not coming from a place of purity, if it's not coming from a place of fearing Hashem, and of integrity, and of the uninterrupted continuation of the transmission of Torah since Mount Sinai, then it's a perversion. But yet, like the golden calf, you think you have it right here, and you think that you are understanding it, and you think that this is it. And so that's worse, if anything. So we're not anti-translation, we're not bashing a translation, we're not saying people shouldn't study in translations, and in fact it's a wonderful thing for people to be able to study Torah. But you have to be very careful, and you have to understand that it is a double-edged sword, and that there is an innate danger inherent in the act of translation, and you have to be so careful and trembling with the fear and honor of Hashem, to know that you are studying something from a reliable source, that it should not just become another golden calf.
So once again, this Friday, the 8th of Tevet, is the day of the translating of the Torah into Greek, Septuagint. The 9th, which is Shabbat, is the yahrzeit, the anniversary of the deaths of Ezra and Nehemiah, who led the Jews out of Babylon back into Jerusalem.
And Sunday, the 10th, is a communal fast day for the siege of Jerusalem.
The anniversary of the siege
and may it be turned into a day of rejoicing. It's a day for ascending the Temple Mount and for overturning the decree of the siege against Jerusalem. It's a day for the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and that starts with each and every one of us.
B'meira b'yameinu, speedily in our days. Thanks for being with us. Temple Talk.